我看你分明是怕死。
余渊出语怎会和他有关系？
叛军到底埋下了多少势力？
旧时代传说中的魔神竟然现世了！
倘若他们成功，必遭父辈加工。
All aboard, the vessel gradually ascended. Yu Qinghong surveyed the crew and noted that every sailor was heavily tattooed, their appearances fierce and intimidating. Many bore scars, while others were missing a nose or an eye. A palpable aura of menace clung to them, marking them unmistakably as men of ill repute. The dilapidated ship lifted into the air, groaning like an old ox straining under the weight of a broken cart as it slowly departed the capital. The sight deepened the group's despondency. Qin Wanyan murmured to the others that the crew seemed to be ruthless bandits, likely skilled practitioners of the divine arts. He worried that Academician Qin, being inexperienced in the ways of the martial world, had fallen into a trap. He cautioned everyone to remain vigilant on this journey to avoid being robbed. No sooner had he spoken than the rickety ship abruptly accelerated with a mournful shriek, piercing through the air. A violent tremor shook the vessel as its speed surpassed that of sound, covering miles in an instant. Several barrels of wine were sent flying, exploding mid-air upon impact with the fierce winds. Everyone quickly steadied themselves, looking around in shock. They watched as their ship swiftly overtook and left far behind all the vessels that had set sail earlier. Its speed was unimaginable. At this rate, they would reach the surging river in just a day or two. Qin Mu, having forged the ship's furnace himself, was long accustomed to this and felt no surprise. Fan Yuxiao comforted the alarmed scholars, assuring them that the ship was sturdier than it looked. He mentioned that despite his own initial fears, it had never fallen apart on previous trips and likely wouldn't this time either. Just then, a deck plank was ripped loose by the gale and flew away with a whoosh. Fan Yuxiao, brimming with confidence, told them not to worry. He called for his second-in-command to fetch another plank, only for another one to be blown away immediately. He repeatedly urged everyone to relax, insisting he had everything under control. Suddenly, the ship passed through a rainstorm. The downpour drenched Fan Yuxiao, causing the colors on his body to run. Hu Linger cried out in surprise, noticing that the rain was washing away old Zhao's tattoos. Other bandits on the cloud-chasing pirate ship also found their tattoos blurring, with one even shouting that the rain was washing off his scar. Fan Yuxiao, somewhat embarrassed, suggested they could find painters to reapply the tattoos after disembarking, though he mused that since they had all turned over a new leaf, perhaps the tattoos were no longer necessary. He then told his second-in-command to remove his eye patch, noting that it was frightening the scholars. The second mate complied, revealing a perfectly intact eye. Monk Yun Ke muttered to himself that these bandits seemed rather unreliable. Meanwhile, Qin Mu was deep in discussion with the bandit leader, consulting a computational cannon. Hu Linger found a handkerchief and wiped the dragon head tattoo on Fan Yuxiao's back, causing it to vanish completely. Pouting, she remarked that she had thought the tattoos were real. Fan Yuxiao gave a dry laugh, muttering that real tattoos were painful, and since one's body, hair, and skin are gifts from one's parents, how could one defile them so recklessly? Qin Mu inquired about the immense numerals in the computational canon of supreme mystery, such as Yi, Zhao, Jing, and Gai, asking what they could possibly be used to calculate. Fan Yuxiao explained that the Dao Master had once told him they were for immeasurable calculations, describing a system where numbers could grow infinitely large. He also mentioned the infinitesimally small decimals used for division, down to terms like Kong, Su, and Xinjiang. These, he said, were used to calculate the finest particles of vital qi. Forging various treasures required such precise calculations, where the slightest error could lead to vastly different outcomes. Qin Mu nodded in admiration, acknowledging the extraordinary depth of Taoist algebra. He consulted earnestly, and Fan Yuxiao shared all he knew, having cultivated to the fifth writing of the Tao sect and possessing profound knowledge in algebra. After flying for over a day, the cloud-chasing pirate ship finally reached the surging river, sailing up to the camp on the southern bank. Lizhou Prefecture had amassed a massive military force along the river, linking over 200 camps. A fierce battle had just concluded, with the wreckage of ships littering the river surface, some still burning and spewing thick smoke from their masts and decks. Corpses floated on the water. Soldiers cast fishing nets from their ships to retrieve the bodies, then used hooks to haul them aboard, intending to bury them upon reaching shore. Qin Mu activated his green heaven's eyes to observe the opposite bank. A ruined city stood there, with sporadic flashes of divine arts indicating ongoing skirmishes, likely the Eternal Peace Empire's forces mopping up remaining enemies. Fan Yunxiao slowed the ship and began its descent into the camp. A soldier flew up to inquire about their purpose and, upon learning they were scholars from the Imperial College, signaled for the archers below to stand down. As the ship landed, Fan Yunxiao glanced towards the distant skirmishes with his heterochromatic eyes, then shook his head at Chen Wanyan, Yun Ke, and the others. He told Qin Mu that these scholars would only be a hindrance, offering little help in a battle of this scale and struggling merely to survive. He announced his departure, saying he would return once he had gathered enough black iron and the blueprint for the treasure ship. With that, he ordered his crew to activate the furnace, and the ship flew away. Yun Ke and the others were disheartened. Chen Wanyan sneered, commenting that while the man's abilities might be decent, his judgment was clearly flawed. A general approached and asked if they were the scholars from the Imperial College. Qin Mu confirmed this and inquired if the young magistrate of Lizhou Prefecture was at the front lines, requesting an audience on behalf of Qin Mu from Riverdike County. The general, surprised, hurried off to relay the message. Soon, the clanking of armor announced the arrival of a female general. Clad in battle-worn armor, she carried her helmet under her arm. Her demeanor was heroic, her features strikingly beautiful, with meticulously applied makeup that left a deep impression. Fresh bloodstains still marked her attire, evidence of her recent return from the battlefield. Yuan Chu's gaze fell on Qin Mu, her eyes lighting up in recognition. She greeted him as the young man who had emerged from Riverdike County months ago, noting that he had since made a name for himself. She mentioned hearing about him from her elder brother and expressed her happiness at his success. Qin Mu, blushing slightly, admitted that he had not previously disclosed his origins from the Great Ruins. Yuan Chu replied that after his departure, she had wondered which Qin family in Riverdike County could have produced such an exceptional youth. It was only later, upon receiving a letter from her elder brother, that she learned he was from the Great Ruins. Yun Ke, Yu Qinghong and the rest were secretly astonished. Lizhou Prefecture was the place of lodging for all imperial scholars that came out for experience. Never did they expect that Qin Mu was actually well acquainted with Lizhou Prefecture young magistrate. Being the high official of such a place, she was already the commander of the borders. In addition to that, Yuan Chu had an extraordinary background. She was the princess of Yuan Empire back then, and the other crown prince of Yuan Empire was Yuan Chu, who had become the great general in the capital city. Qin Mu was clearly the abandoned person of Great Ruins. How did he get affiliated with Yuan Chu? Big Sister Chu, what happened to Corpse Immortal Cult? Qin Mu asked. Corpse Immortal Cult has already been eradicated by me, but there are still some remnants that have escaped to the southern borders. Yuan Chu brought them to the city walls and said, "The rebel army from everywhere have already gathered in the southern borders. There are also rebel sects from everywhere. All sorts of forces meet and mingle together here. The troops get stationed in all the cities along the river and are taking strict precaution. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg and the current situation doesn't look good." Tip of the iceberg? Everyone was stunned for a moment. Yuan Chu smiled. In the world today, do you know who is loyal and who is a traitor? For example me, I'm the princess of the vanquished Yuan Empire. How would you know that I would not rebel the next moment? Chen Wanyan and the rest broke out in cold sweat, afraid that this heroic-looking female general would kill them in the next instant, and announced that she would rebel. Yuan Chu said indifferently, Imperial Court's relation to the old generations is too close. Imperial Preceptor wants to create a brand new generation on top of this foundation, but all he could use were always the power of the old generation. His new generation could not break free from the influence of the old generation, therefore who knows which sect or which official would rebel next? Monk Yun Ke asked while shivering. But Lord Magistrate won't rebel, am I right? Yuan Chu looked at him and gave a bone-chilling smile as she said softly, "You can make a guess. If you're right, you cannot die." Yun Ke turned ashen-faced as he was scared witless. Yuan Chu, this commander, had nurtured a great grandeur around her. Even though she was a woman, her cold expression could crush a person with terror. Yuan Chu gave a gentle laugh and summoned a general over. After giving her instructions, the general immediately deployed an army with about 1,000 men. Yuan Chu walked down the city halls and strode onto the river surface. Behind her, 1,000 soldiers also strode over and stepped on the river surface as they moved to the opposite shore. Qin Mu caught up with her and stood on the river surface. Vital chi burst forth under his feet, which held him up stably as he smiled. Big sister, don't scare him. Qin Wanyan and the rest also hurried over and executed their own vital qi to let themselves not sink into the water. They could sprint on water, but to walk calmly on water, it was slightly strenuous. Other than controlling the water, they also needed to have a dense cultivation. Yu and Chu was slightly interested. Little brother, think I won't rebel against the imperial court? Qin Mu shook his head. Because this rebellion is a setup by imperial preceptor to purge the imperial court and the ordinary people. Big sister is a wise person and could see that very clearly. If big sister was dumb, you would have rebelled long ago and not wait until today. Yu and Chu smiled. You're right and also wrong. The reason why I didn't rebel is not that I was clever enough. There were quite a number of people who came forward and urged me to rebel. They were all full of confidence when they came over, thinking they would definitely make me rebel. However, they were all wrong. My Yuyuan family doesn't value our royal position, we value our people of Yuyuan. When Yuyuan Empire was still around back then, Eternal Peace Empire had already become great, and they could wage a war over any time. My father knew if a war was to break out, the empire would definitely be ruined and the families would be torn apart. However, Imperial Preceptor came to Yuyuan and discussed the path with my father. Back then, all the civil and military officials were there, and what they discussed was how to govern an empire and their people. My brother and I were also at the Imperial Court. Then we lost. Her expression remained calm as she said, we suffered a crushing defeat, which we accepted wholeheartedly, of the debate on the path of governing an empire and the path of people's welfare. My father relinquished the title of the emperor and allowed my elder brother to succeed him, but my elder brother didn't accept it and passed the title to me. She gave a smile. No now knew if she was mocking herself or if it was a genuine smile. I had told Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, I'm inferior to you in governing an empire and I'm also inferior to you in looking after the people's welfare. In that case, I'll hand Yuyuan Empire to you. If your governance and people's welfare is not to my satisfaction, I will rebel against you in the future. Imperial Preceptor agreed and let me govern Yuyuan, which is also the current Liz Ho. So that's how it is, everyone suddenly realized. Hu Linger cried out astonishingly. Sister, so you were actually a female emperor? Yuyuan Chiyu smiled and said, being a female emperor for a day, I can tell you, that's no fun. If you want to be an emperor, you can just find any place and proclaim yourself as the emperor. The only problem is how many people you can have jurisdiction over. She looked at the billowing smoke and fire on the river surface and retracted her gaze. She then smiled as she looked at Qin Wanyan and the rest. It's your fortune you guys are able to follow little brother. His abilities are very extraordinary. Yu Qihong and Yun Ke looked at each other and didn't know how this female general saw Qin Mu's abilities as extraordinary. Yu and Qi remembered the time when she had discovered the red corpse beetles scattered throughout the entire mountain at the north of Tiger Sun County. Other than the red corpse beetles, there was also a skeleton which had its flesh and blood melted away, leaving only the bones and the clothes. From the clothes, she could determine that it was an expert of corpse immortal cult. Even though she couldn't see who this expert of corpse immortal cult was, from the method of controlling the corpse beetles and amount of corpse beetles, that expert's cultivation had probably already reached 7 stars realm. Corpse immortal cult was proficient in corpses and poison, thus their cultivation realm was not that high. But when one clashed with corpse immortal cult, even people with a higher cultivation and battle prowess than them would find it very hard to defeat them. Yet this expert of corpse immortal cult had died from being poisoned, and the one that poisoned him would have been this little brother beside her who looked honest and naive. Back then, this little brother had even deceived her, making her write a travel permit for him and recommended him to go to the capital city. In Yu and Chuyu's heart, for Qin Wanyan and the rest to be able to follow such a crafty fellow out for experience, they would be even safer than if they had followed the directorates. Therefore, she had said it was the fortune of Qin Wanyan and the rest. When they reached the opposite shore, the buildings in this city on the opposite shore had already collapsed, killing God knows how many people. Yu and Chuyu led the army into the city and said, "Just now I said this was just the tip of the iceberg. There is still another reason other than that. Look at this. Taking down Deer County was a walk in the park. We easily invaded and took over this place, so aren't the rebel army a little too weak?" Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Enticing the enemies to enter deeply? This is not only enticing the enemies to enter, the old foxes haven't even made their moves. Yu and Chiyu's gaze flickered. The 3 old monsters that injured Imperial Preceptors still haven't appeared. The old monsters of the old generation might not just be the three of them. There are Passion-Parting Palace Master Chiu Die, the three castle lords of Three Wonders Castle, high officials that have rebelled, Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect, and as well as other strong practitioners of the cult master level, and none of them have appeared yet. Other big and small cult masters, sect masters, are all very quiet. Furthermore, she said in a low voice, who knows if there are any gods that had survived from the old generation? Qin Mu gave a few cold shudders. Chen Wanyan and the rest also felt their blood run cold. Yu Yuanqiu obviously knew many things about the old generation, but she didn't delve into details. You guys can be at ease, these old monsters wouldn't easily make their move on the younger generation like you. Their target is Imperial Preceptor and the first-ranking high officials of the Imperial Court. Deer County was seized by a sect not much bigger than Corpse Immortal Cult, which is called Nine Spectres Sect. Now that the rebellion in Deer County has just been quelled, and there are still some remnants from Nine Spectres Sect escaping, I'll give you an easy task: eradicate all of the remnants. Her gaze shone brightly as it landed on Qin Mu and the rest. Nine Spectres Sect is proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil. They say they could invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle, therefore, you guys have to make some preparations. When the other scholars are here, you guys will go forward to eradicate them. Proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil? Can invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle? Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and he suddenly thought of Soul Guide and Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command. These two spells were spells that were related to souls and supernatural beings which were found by him on the first level of floor of Heavenly Records. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command was from Great Mountain Sect, and as for Soul Guide, it was from Nine Spectres Sect. These two spells were placed in the first level of floor of Heavenly Records because there were lesser people who would cultivate spells that deviated from the average. They were spells that belonged to the soul category, yet they didn't have much offensive power. Especially for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command, this spell declared that it could dispatch ghost gods, yet when Qin Mu tried it a few times, it was at the most similar to the 5 ghost transfer technique. However, it was much complicated. When Qin Mu found these two spells, he had once made Chancellor Ba Shan give him pointers. However, Chancellor Ba Shan also despised these two unpopular spells and didn't study them before, therefore he had thrown them back to him and told him to comprehend them himself. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command might be similar to 5 ghost transfer technique, but the runes were obviously much more complicated and required one to refine a talisman treasure. This talisman treasure was much more complicated than the one Qin Mu saw in Roland's Golden Palace. It was a completely different sphere and had 1024 irregular surfaces. On each surface had a complicated rune. Meanwhile, Roland's Golden Palace's talisman treasure only had 14 surfaces. It was exactly because Qin Mu saw the runes in Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command being complicated, he had thought this divine art was very powerful. Never did he expect its effect was only equivalent to 5 ghost transfer technique. He felt that Great Mountain Sect might have somewhat concealed the technique. However, this sect had vanished from this world and no longer existed. Meanwhile, Qin Mu had also cultivated Soul Guide from Nine Spectres Sect, but he had not tried out if he could succeed in guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. The two spells had some runes that were similar, and both of them should be spells related to the soul category. Qin Mu bought some yellow joss paper, cinnabar, and spent 2 days to create talisman treasure for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command before spending another day to write down the runes needed for Soul Guide as well, comparing the both together. Comparing them with each other, Qin Mu finally could confirm that both Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command had mistakes. There were some runes among them that were purposely written wrongly. These sects were not willing to hand the spells of their own sects to the Imperial Court, therefore, they had purposely written a few runes wrongly, lowering the power of the spell drastically or even making it unusable. The runes for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command needed an extremely high amount of runes, so even when there were over a dozen mistakes, there were still over 1,000 correct runes. This was a huge treasure vault of knowledge. With this knowledge, Qin Mu could fix the wrong runes in Soul Guide. There were over 600 types of rune arrangements the Soul Guide required, and Qin Mu fixed the wrong runes that he had spotted. When he found that there was no mistake anymore, he immediately called a soldier over to ask, "Are there corpses in the city? I would like to test my spell." That soldier asked, "Lord requires the corpses of 9 Spectres Sect to test your spell?" The corpses of 9 Spectres sect were all buried, so if you need them, they'll have to be dug up. Qin Mu's face changed slightly and hurriedly asked, "Where were they buried?" That soldier replied, "We buried some in the disorderly burial mounds beside River Dike County, and the others were buried in Deer Mountain beside Deer County. We just buried the corpses that we fished out a few days ago at wherever that was close." Qin Mu's mind pounded and he hurriedly said, "Where's the young magistrate? Quickly inform the young magistrate and let her order the whole army to be on guard before sending soldiers to the disorderly burial mounds and Deer Mountain to burn the corpses." The soldier didn't understand what he meant, but he still ran out in a hurry while shouting. Young magistrate had gone over to River Dike County at the opposite shore to soothe the people. "I'll head over right now to inform her. Big Sister Chiyu is at River Dike County? This is bad." Qin Mu summoned another soldier over and told him to inform the guards to be on alert before immediately finding Chen Wanyan, Yu Qinghong and the rest, and told them quickly, 9 Spectres sect might be making a comeback. Quickly be on alert." Chen Wanyan, Yu Qinghong and the rest were all beyond bewildered. Monkey K asked, "The people of 9 Spectres sect are almost all eradicated and only a few people are left escaping for their lives. Why do we have to guard against these few people? They are faking their death." Just as Qin Mu said that, suddenly, a faint singing came from the river's surface. This singing voice sounded ancient and obscure, as if it was a god of the netherworld summoning the souls of the dead back. It gave people the feeling that a hazy and imposing god had opened the gate to the other world, sending the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. Qin Mu's face changed hugely and his footsteps sprinted like he was flying as he broke through the air, landing on the north gate of the city tower. The north gate of the city was empty, and there were only a few soldiers patrolling. Lizhou Prefecture's huge army had just experienced a huge battle, therefore, most of them were nursing themselves. Qin Mu looked towards the river surface and only saw a Taoist with a straw hat standing on a ship's mast in the center of surging river. He was currently casting spells and singing on the river, and a huge rune gave off a green glow as if there were numerous green snakes wiggling in the sky. Yun Kei and the rest came running over and stood beside Qin Mu to look towards the river surface. Chen Wanyan asked, "What is happening?" Before he could even finish his words, he fell into a daze when he saw black fog surging over from the river. The area which the black fog had shrouded became larger and larger, wider and wider. Among the darkness, a towering gate could be seen at the heart of the river, floating above the water. In the blink of an eye, the sky turned dark. Qin Mu looked towards the opposite shore and could faintly see a few ships that were ferrying the scholars sailed over. He then saw the darkness shrouded the scholars' ships. There was also a scholar's ship which had reached the sky above surging river, which was also shrouded by the darkness. Shouts of anger and cries of astonishment sounded out from the ship, making it obvious they had met something unexpected weird. He turned his head towards Deer Mountain on the left of River Dike County. River Dike County suddenly burst open as small figures rushed into the mid-air, pouncing towards their location. The few soldiers who were guarding the west city gate of Deer County couldn't react in time and were fixed in place by the yellow talismans used from the few figures that came flying over, slaughtering them on the spot. Boom! The west city gate blew wide open and the corpses rushed into the county city, slaughtering the guards who had yet reorganized themselves. These corpses were indeed corpses, but the corpses still had the souls of the dead. The Taoist on the river cast a spell and used Soul Guide to summon the souls of all the dead people in 9 Spectre sect, allow their souls to return to their body and commence a sudden attack on the guards of Deer County. These corpses were all worn out. There were some that only had a piece of skin attaching their heads to their bodies, while some had a huge hole opened up in their chests. Some were missing their limbs, and they all looked terrifyingly sinister. They were indeed dead, but their souls were pulled back from the netherworld and returned to their bodies, thus their abilities were still the same as if they were alive. Even Chen Wanyan was stunned at this sight as he stood on the city tower not knowing what to do. Qin Mu looked towards River Dike County on the opposite shore, which was already shrouded by the black fog. Only the explosions of divine arts could be faintly heard. "Abandon the city, we'll head to the east gate." Qin Mu made his decision. Chen Wanyan and the rest jolted back to their senses, and Qin Mu sprinted along the city walls while shouting for the dragon Qilin and Hu Linger to return. Turmoil had already broken out in Deer County City as everyone was caught unprepared and got killed by those corpses that were revived by 9 Spectre sect. The army of Eternal Peace Empire was used to cultivate skills of combined assault. By cultivating the same spell or sword skill, 10 or more soldiers would just need to group up and work together closely for them to be able to even kill opponents a realm higher than them. These kind of battle techniques were extremely useful in a large-scale battle, which could be said that killing enemies was as easy as smashing rotten wood, resulting in an utter defeat for the sects which dared to resist. However, this battle in Deer County City also exhibited the disadvantages of this battle technique. 9 Spectres sect revived corpses to slaughter their way in the city, scattering these soldiers before they could organize themselves. Fighting on their own, the ability of these soldiers was much inferior to the disciples of the sects in the martial world, thus it was almost a one-sided massacre. The sky turned darker and darker. After these disciples of 9 Spectres sect were revived, the darkness was like daylight to them. They could see everything clearly, and they were not afraid of death. They were originally corpses, thus they couldn't feel any pain and had no need to defend against the opponent's move. They could just pounce over and kill people directly. Furthermore, 9 Spectres sect as a sect, there was no lack of experts. Even the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm were also revived. This kind of reviving wasn't a real reviving, and was just using spells to summon the souls of the dead back. These souls of the dead would still have to return to Netherworld, but in this period of time, it was enough for them to sweep away all the guards in Deer County. The guards of Deer County are finished. Qin Mu's heart sunk, and when he saw Hu Linger and the dragon Qilin rushing over, only then did he let out a sigh of relief. Everyone immediately jumped off the East City Gate and ran away from the city in the darkness. Behind, the East City Gate suddenly collapsed as it got shattered into pieces by the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm. Qin Mu turned his head to look back and saw a general of Celestial Being Realm being torn apart by a few strong practitioners of 9 Spectres sect that got revived. There were still a few Taoists that were executing the yellow joss papers and walking in the sky. This made Qin Mu's heart sink. These few Taoists were the remnants of Corpse Immortal Cult. With the alliance of Corpse Immortal Cult and 9 Spectres sect, one of them would control corpses while the other would control souls. There probably wouldn't be much soldiers in the city left. Academician Qin, we should cross the river and return to River Dike County, Chen Wanyan said solemnly. Qin Mu shook his head. There are also quite a lot of corpses sunk in the river. We can't return. Just as he said that, sounds of water traveled over from the riverside. Among the black-colored fog, the revived corpses walked ashore from the bottom of the river with water dripping off their bodies. When they saw them, they suddenly sprinted towards here. We can only head to southern borders and look for the chance to return to the north. Qin Mu had no change in expression as he raised his hand to pat his waist. A sword light flew out from Taotia's sack and transformed into wave sword form. With the sword light revolving, it severed the heads of the 9 Spectres sect's disciples. The few 9 Spectres sect's disciples became headless zombies. They immediately bent over and picked up their heads, clasping them under their armpits, and continued to rush over. A head under the armpit of the corpse opened his mouth and shouted with a sharp voice, "Come quickly, there are some that have slipped through the net. Come quickly!" Even though Yunke, Yu Qinghong, and Chen Wanyan were quite knowledgeable and seen a lot, they had never seen such a sinister spell before. On the other hand, Xinjiang, who was always shy and timid, was calm and composed. She was not the slightest afraid. Qin Mu spread his 5 fingers and gave a sudden squeeze. The sword light of Junior Protector Sword immediately turned into spiral sword form. The sword spun and sliced the disciples of 9 Spectres sect into pieces as he warned solemnly. "Move quickly, in case the experts of 9 Spectres sect catches up." The few of them quickly sprinted towards the darkness. Yumke looked at the flames surrounding Deer County and felt slight fear and dismal in his heart. To the southern borders? That's the nest of the enemies. The black fog grew denser and denser. It was daytime, yet it looked like the night. Qin Mu and the rest could still roughly determine the direction. When they raised their heads up to the sky, they could still see the sun, but the sun wasn't harsh to their eyes. It was like a faint circular halo that was much dimmer than the moonlight. Looking around their surrounding, they could only see the green mountain turning into a hazy black mountain. Noisy voices came from behind as someone shouted, "There are a few that escaped. There are 3 males and 3 females, and also a huge lion. Don't go away, pick up my head. Come back quickly." Qin Mu's heart moved slightly, and he looked towards Chen Wanyan. Chen Wanyan understood his intention, and his flying sword flew out of his sheath to dig a long hole in the ground for him to lie down. It was the first time he had met such a weird incident of the dead reviving, therefore, He was slightly at a loss, but now he had already calmed down. Qin Mu waved his sleeves and swept up the earth on both sides, burying Chen Wanyan under the earth. The rest of them continued walking forward, and they didn't move much further when they heard miserable shrieks coming from their back. "Someone hid in the earth to ambush us. My head is severed. Does anyone see my head? Shut up, idiot! If your head is missing, how are you talking?" "So I see. No wonder I couldn't find it for so long. Which senior brother saw my leg? Sorry to trouble you, much thanks." Qin Mu made the dragon Qilin stop, and Chen Wanyan immediately caught up. "There shouldn't be any more pursuers. Let us go quickly." Suddenly, singing voices faintly sounded out from the fog, and these songs were even more peculiar than the song coming from the river surface. These songs had no cadence and sounded very monotonous. Qin Mu made them stop for a moment, while he sneaked over and saw the few singers that were singing. They were a few corpses singing and casting spells, executing soul guide in the dark forest. Their bodies were tattered and they looked very strange, casting spells in the darkness. Dead people casting spells? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He suddenly thought of the divine art of Nine Spectres sect and felt that they had the flavor of breaking through the boundary of life and death. If this kind of divine art was researched to its limit, could it break the boundary between life and death and achieve eternal life? The divine arts of Nine Spectres sect were far from being called eternal life now. They were only guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld, to allow the souls to reside in their own bodies temporarily. They had to continue to execute Soul Guide, and if they stopped executing Soul Guide, their souls might probably be dragged back to the netherworld and they would really die. No wonder those corpses are also executing Soul Guide. Qin Mu thought to himself. They must execute Soul Guide continuously for them to be able to continue moving. These dead men are not weak in cultivation, therefore, it's still best to avoid them. He left these dead people alone and sneaked back. Let us change a direction. They didn't move much further when they met another group of 9 Spectre sect's disciples that were casting spells. Other than these 9 Spectre sect's disciples that were already dead, he also saw a few disciples of Corpse Immortal Cult that were also controlling corpses to surround the soldiers that were escaping from the city. The flying zombies flew by walking on the yellow joss papers beneath their feet. Qin Mu frowned and changed another direction. Let us head to Deer Mountain. The corpses of 9 Spectres sect were buried there, and they slaughtered their way to the county city from there, therefore it must be empty over there. Everyone was extremely nervous as the people of 9 Spectres sect and Corpse Immortal Cult were now everywhere in the black fog. Since Corpse Immortal Cult was eradicated by Yuan Chiu, he reckoned the cult disciples' corpses were also buried nearby, allowing 9 Spectres sect to revive them as well. It was obvious that 9 Spectres sect had come prepared, catching Yuan Chiu off guard. If this situation went on, Lizho would probably be in danger. Qin Mu thought to himself. There must definitely be a ruthless fellow behind the scenes in 9 Spectres sect. For victory, he could even sacrifice the lives of so many disciples of 9 Spectres sect unscrupulously. They came to Deer Mountain, and there was indeed no one here. The black fog had also faded quite a bit. Chen Wanyan, Yun Kei and the rest gradually put their hearts down. As long as they crossed this mountain and left the area shrouded by the black fog, they would be temporarily safe. Suddenly, a cadence chant sounded from the mountain. Everyone's heart turned anxious again, and they looked towards Qin Mu. Qin Mu frowned slightly and whispered, "Something's wrong with his chanting. This isn't Soul Guide and is another kind of spell." Yu Qinghong and the rest couldn't hear the difference. They didn't know much about Soul Guide of 9 Spectres sect while Qin Mu had studied this divine art before, thus he could hear some disparity from the chants. "You guys stay here, I'll go and have a look." Qin Mu instructed them and approached the chantings silently. When he came near to the chantings, Qin Mu's footsteps became even softer. On the mountain col in front of him, he could see a sacrificial altar, and there were over 10 male and female Taoists casting spells on the sacrificial altar. That sacrificial altar was constructed by skeletons. The length and width were the same, each being 13 yards long. Meanwhile, on the altar, skulls were used to create a flat surface. With a white banner erected at the 4 corners, north, south, east, west. Runes written in cinnabar mixed with blood were on the white banners. A sculpture of an 8-armed devil god was erected on the center of the sacrificial altar. This sculpture squatted with one single leg, while the other leg wrapped the previous one around the back of its calf. With the palms of the 8 arms clasped together, the devil god had 4 faces, and each face had 3 eyes. These male and female Taoists each executed a talisman treasure, and the talisman treasures floated in the air. The talisman had numerous surfaces, and on each surface was a rune. With these Taoists chant, the runes on the talisman treasures lighted up continuously. The runes that lighted up shone precisely on the body of the devil god sculpture. Whenever a place got shown on, a rune would light up on the devil god sculpture. The talisman treasure continuously spun and lighted up the runes on the sculpture one after another. At this moment, more than half of the runes on this devil god sculpture had been lighted up. Ghost transferring god dispatching runes command. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. The spells of Great Mountain Sect. They are the disciples of Great Mountain Sect which was already exterminated. These dozen male and female Taoists were all divine arts practitioners, and it looked like that they had already been executing ghost transferring god dispatching runes command for quite some time. It was obvious that after Great Mountain Sect was exterminated, they had conspired to strike back, allying themselves with Nine Spectres Sect and Corpse Immortal Cult. Qin Mu then took the time which Nine Spectres Sect rose up in revolt into consideration, and found it was precisely the time when the scholars of Imperial College were just arriving at Lizhou and Deer County. This meant that there was someone who had clearly kept tabs on the movement of the scholars of Imperial College, and even the time the Imperial scholars would reach here. The scholars of Imperial College coming out for experience were all elites chosen from their own realms. These scholars would become the future officials of Eternal Peace Empire, taking over the current batch of officials that had come from each and every sect. The current officials mostly belonged to the older generation, while the Imperial scholars were the new generation. If this batch of scholars was to be entirely eradicated, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would lose a pillar of strength in his new generation. This time the scholars coming out for experience was a decree by the Emperor, and those who knew this beforehand would only be the first-ranking high officials who held high authority other than Gu Linwan. Qin Mu's gaze flickered. Among the first-ranking powerful ministers, there were definitely people who had betrayed. He very much wanted to continue watching how these disciples of Great Mountain Sect summoned the Devil God, but if he waited until the Devil God was summoned, their deaths would probably be due. Qin Mu sneaked back silently and described what he had seen to Chen Wanyan and the rest. 13 divine arts practitioners and their abilities aren't weak. If they bring out the Devil God, none of us will be able to escape. We'll have to eliminate them before they bring out the Devil God and destroy the sacrificial altar. Who dares to follow me to kill them? Kill divine arts practitioners? Yun Ke and Yu Qinghong were both astonished. And 13 of them? Qin Mu gave them a glance. You guys don't dare? Yun Ke muttered. I felt a little afraid. They are divine arts practitioners and furthermore, there are 13 of them. Qin Mu replied solemnly. If we don't kill them, when they bring out the Devil God, not only will we die, the entire Lizhou would be destroyed. Chen Wanyan muttered to himself irresolutely and asked, Is Great Mountain Sect a spell sect? Xianxiang tightened the sword case on her back and said, I've heard my elders mention before that Great Mountain Sect was a sect that was proficient in cultivating spells related to souls. They aren't as proficient in sword skills or battle techniques. Back then, when Imperial Preceptor exterminated Great Mountain Sect, he brought a team of divine arts practitioners that cultivated sword skill to attack Great Mountain, exterminating this sect. After Great Mountain Sect got exterminated, their disciples that were scattered outside might not learn the traditional spells and won't have many attainments in their battle techniques and sword skills. Qin Mu said, Imperial Preceptor used sword skills to kill them, but we won't use sword skills, we'll use battle techniques. If we use sword skills, we won't win their spells. But in close combat, before they could even execute their spells, they would be slain by us. Wanyan, Yunke, Qinghong, I've seen your battle techniques before and they aren't weak. Do you have the guts to face them? Chen Wanyan replied solemnly. You dare, I dare. Qin Mu looked at Xianxiang and Xianxiang lowered her head while saying, Yunxiang will take Imperial Academician as my only guide. Qin Mu then looked at Yu Qinghong and her eyes were sparkling as she found it hard to suppress her excitement. I had never come to grips with such a situation before, how can I not participate? Wolf Slave, get ready as well. Qin Mu's gaze fell on Monk Yun Ke and he hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth. If I don't enter hell, who would? I'm in, Qin Mu said. I will be the first to rush out later and slaughter my way up to the sacrificial altar to pave the way for you guys. You guys will follow behind me and fight in close combat. We'll have to fight as quick as possible and cannot drag the battle out. The sacrificial is only 13 by 13 yards. With such cramped space, you guys will have to think what move you want to use and go through it several times in your mind. Yu Qinghong was so excited both her hands were trembling as she smiled. Qin Mu dragged his knife and the female Taoist's forehead bled. Her vital qi immediately burst forth and the horsetail whisk in her other hand bloomed like a flower that had countless petals. The thousands of threads from the horsetail whisk stabbed towards Qin Mu. Her attacks just unleashed, and she saw countless of sword light overwhelming her. Midnight battle across stormy cities. Qin Mu's footsteps moved and he avoided the horsetail whisk that was stabbing towards him and went behind the female Taoist's corpse which had not collapsed to the ground yet. Behind that female Taoist corpse, there was a Taoist behind her. That Taoist had already returned to his senses and yellow jas papers flew out from the pouch on his waist. However, at this moment, Qin Mu threw away his knives and jabbed with his fingers putting together. The vital qi at his fingertips turned into incomparably sharp sword light and penetrated through the heart of that Taoist's brows. Behind Qin Mu, a dragon and an elephant rose into the sky. The dragon coiled around Yun Ke as he stepped on the elephant and slaughtered towards a female Taoist. A loud boom sounded out as he smashed the female Taoist onto the sculpture of the devil god. That female Taoist spat out blood and her vital qi burst forth, reflecting him away. She was about to kill him when a sword light flashed by and smeared her throat, giving off a soft clink sound. This female Taoist's vital qi was so dense that she actually used her vital qi to block this sword. However, in the next moment, Chen Wanyan appeared beside her and grabbed the sword's hilt. With all his strength, he actually pushed her onto the devil god's sculpture and pulled out his sword forcefully, bursting forth with blood light. Wolf's slave's body flashed, and he leaped onto the head of the sculpture. With two of his devil knives appearing and disappearing unpredictably, he hacked downwards. Meanwhile, Yu Qinghong stood on the shoulders of Wolf's slave and sharp swords flew out from the sword case on her back, turning into drill sword form as she stabbed towards a Taoist below. That Taoist grabbed a white banner stab on the altar and held the banner in a reverse grip. The white banner trembled and the runes on the banner lighted up and swam out like weird red snakes to block the two devil knives. Meanwhile, Yu Qinghong's drill sword form drilled through the banner and tunneled into the heart of his brows. At the same time, Xianxiang flashed past like a phantom and gave repeated blows with a kind of strange madra, vibrating another female Taoist to death, shattering all her bones. Chen Wenyan's heart leaped when he saw this. Junior sister C hid her abilities well, her cultivation is extremely powerful. He leaped towards another Taoist, and the Taoist suddenly jumped down from the altar to run away. Behind him, the yellow jas paper flew towards the sacrificial altar. Chen Wanyan immediately gave chase, but the yellow jas papers exploded one after another, blowing him away ruthlessly. At the other side, Yun Ke moved to block that Taoist, executing Great 5 platform madra to block that Taoist's way. That Taoist sneered and splayed out his 5 fingers. Thunder burst forth from the heart of his palm and shook Yun Ke's soul. That Taoist put his mind at rest and shouted sternly, "A bunch of younger generation that hasn't even cultivated to 6 fusion realm actually." Just as he said that, he felt a chill from the back of his heart, and he lowered his head to see a sword piercing through his chest. He had totally no idea when that person behind him had closed in on him. Qin Mu pulled out his sword and the person croaked, "Great body technique!" When he finished saying that, he collapsed to the ground and stopped breathing. Qin Mu returned his sword into the sheath, and on the altar, Yu Qinghong, Wolf's slave, and Xinjiang were still killing the other Taoists. They circled the altar and saw corpses surrounding the devil god's sculpture. Some Taoists were not collapsed on the floor and were nailed to the devil god's sculpture. Some of the Taoists were hung on the white banner, and some were turned into a pile of mush. Some of their heads were smashed by an iron hammer, and they all died differently. The 3 of them were shaken, and Xinjiang inspected the corpses with a grave expression. These corpses had all suffered Qin Mu's ruthless attack in an instant, and died before they could even unleash their divine arts. They all basically died from just one move, she thought to herself secretly, and raised her eyes to look at Qin Mu. 13 divine arts practitioners. Even though their battle techniques weren't strong, divine arts practitioners were divine arts practitioners after all. Even though everyone said that it was sure death if a strong practitioner of the spell school was to be closed in by strong practitioners of the battle technique school, those were only casual talk. If there was a difference in realm, battle techniques might not be able to break through the opponent's defensive divine arts. Even though they had caught the enemies unprepared, Qin Mu's battle prowess was way too strong, his speed was also way too fast. Qin Mu trembled his junior protector's sword and shook off the blood on his sword. Returning the sword into his sheath, he said, "Clean the battlefield and immediately destroy the devil god's sculpture." Just as he had said that, a loud boom suddenly came from not far away. Blood light shone among the black fog, dyeing the pitch-black fog blood red. That blood light was over 300 yards high, and they could even see it clearly while standing at the mountain col. A terrifying force surged from another realm, crashing down upon the source of the crimson light. Thunderous rumbles followed as lightning bolts struck all around the blood-red glow. These were spatial lightning compressed by the overwhelming power. When such immense force violently shook space, it grew unstable, releasing the hidden lightning within. Everyone watched in a daze as an enormous figure gradually rose where the crimson light and lightning converged. It was a devil god, sculpted yet lifelike, with horns upon its head, 4 arms, and 4 legs. Though merely a statue, towering flames erupted from its form as if a true devil god had descended into the world. This manifested devil god stood even taller than Deer Mountain itself. Billowing smoke wreathed its body, mingled with flames and streaks of lightning, while the crimson light soared skyward, hovering above its head. Qin Mu felt a chill run through his limbs. On the other side, the sorcerers of the Great Mountain sect had succeeded in their ritual, summoning this devil god. The devil god's gaze was like interwoven lightning bolts. Wherever it swept, trees and rocks instantly turned to ashes with a sizzle. Qin Mu exhaled turbid air and commanded in a low voice, "Strip." The group was momentarily stunned. Monk Yun-Kei muttered under his breath, undressing again. But Xinjiang understood Qin Mu's intent and immediately began removing the clothes from the corpses on the ground. The others quickly caught on and hurriedly stripped the garments from the fallen Great Mountain sect disciples. After changing into the sect's attire, Qin Mu instructed quietly, "Pull out those white banners and gather the talismanic treasures as backup." Chen Wanyun and the others moved forward to retrieve the banners and talismans. Once prepared, they watched as the devil god stormed toward the river, its presence churning the surging river's waves into towering sprays. Their expressions shifted dramatically. The dragon Qilin had also rushed over. Qin Mu spoke urgently, "We must leave this place immediately. It's no longer safe for scholars like us at the 5 Elements realm. Do any of you have items identifying you as Imperial scholars? Hand them all to me." Yun-Kei produced his pass and book tablet, muttering, "Are we truly marching to our deaths by heading to the southern border?" Qin Mu collected everyone's passes and tablets into his Taotai sack. "We'll detour through the southern border. Once we cross the battlefield and the river, we'll be safe on the northern shore." He took a deep breath and was about to order the move when his gaze fell upon the unfinished devil god sculpture. Hesitating for a moment, he lifted it and secured it to the dragon Qilin's back. "Let us go southward." With heavy hearts, the group followed him along the foothills toward the south. After 3 or 4 miles, they finally emerged from the area shrouded in black fog. Another few miles ahead, Qin Mu looked back to see the fog looming like an immense black cauldron covering the surging river's surroundings, trapping both shores. At the center of the black fog stood a massive gate, a passage between life and death, connected to the netherworld. "I wonder how many in Lizhou will survive," Qin Mu thought to himself. Not long after, Qin Mu suddenly halted. "The army is here." Yun-Kei brightened. "Our Eternal Peace Army?" Qin Mu shook his head, pointing ahead. "The rebel army." Dozens of ships flew toward them, banners fluttering. Strange beasts of all shapes and sizes circled the vessels, a myriad of species among them. Below the aerial forces, rows of soldiers, martial and divine arts practitioners marched in formation. Among them were massive beasts, dozens of yards tall, laden with huge circular stones. With each step, the ground trembled as if mountains were moving. Qin Mu and the others stood aside, allowing the vast army heading toward the surging river battlefield to pass. A general on one of the ships shot a lightning-like gaze over them and inquired of an officer beside him, "Who are those people?" The officer glanced at Qin Mu's group. "They appear to be disciples of the Great Mountain sect. I'll go question them." The general leaped from the ship, golden lotuses blooming beneath his feet with each step. Walking step by step through the void, he approached Qin Mu and the others, making everyone feel as though disaster loomed. This was a powerful expert of the 7 Stars realm, capable of treading the void. Killing them would be as easy as blowing away dust. The officer noticed the devil god sculpture on the dragon Qilin's back and asked coldly, "Disciples of the great mountain sect, fleeing from battle, how should you be punished?" Qin Mu bowed, his tone neither servile nor overbearing. "Our great mountain sect has done its utmost. We have already summoned a devil god to aid the battle. We are not guilty but have performed a meritorious deed." The officer snorted coldly. "Yet you fled the battlefield, a crime punishable by death, to be beheaded on the spot." Qin Mu's face showed grief and indignation as he protested, "We suffered a sneak attack from Liz Ho. Of our 13 brothers and sisters, 7 fell in battle, only 6 of us remain. While we risked our lives, where were your forces? Our great mountain sect is nearly wiped out, with only us left. General, must you leave no seeds for our sect?" The general hesitated and looked upward. On the ship above, General Xiaoi spoke solemnly, "The great mountain sect has few members left. Let this matter rest. Summoning a devil god to aid the battle is already a great deed. Have them perform their spells to verify their identity, then release them." Chen Wanyan, Yun Ke, and the others broke out in cold sweat. None of them had ever practiced the spells of the great mountain sect. Qin Mu activated a talismanic treasure, but the general's voice rang out, "Not a treasure, spells." Circulating his vital qi, Qin Mu transformed it into a rune that shone upon the devil god sculpture, igniting a rune on its surface. The general bowed and reported, "General Xiaoi, this is indeed the great mountain sect ghost transferring god dispatching runes command." General Xiaoi waved his hand from the ship. "Let them go. Move the army and attack Liz Ho." Halt. His gaze fixed on Qin Mu and the others, a smile curling on his lips. "Send them to Heaven Wave City. Have them summon another devil god there.